after sacrificing himself to save the world. RMC is reincarnated 100 years into the future with past memories and goes to the Magic Academy. But despite being born with no magic, he becomes the strongest in the academy. Guys, that concludes the intro. Help us get 1069 likes. And let's begin. The scene begins with a blazing red sky as a colossal dragon descends, leading a horde of monstrous fiends to wreak havoc on the ruins below. An officer reports the dragon's strike destroyed 90% of their base, and the general questions humanity's fate. The dragon, named Vritra, glares at the military forces below and growls, commanding them to vanish. With a deafening roar, Vritra unleashes a torrent of hellfire from its mouth, forcing the soldiers to shield their faces, bracing for death. However, a lone swordsman arrives, calmly swinging his sword in the air and dissipating the dragon's hellfire with sheer force. The shocked soldiers recognize the man as Agito, the sword saint of the 8 blades, their hope against the monstrous foe. Clutching his sword, Agito apologizes for his late arrival and reassures the soldiers that he will handle the dragon himself. In the year 19XX, mysterious gates to other dimensions suddenly appeared all over the world. From these gates emerged massive and dangerous monsters, led by 6 powerful dragons bent on destruction. The event also altered humanity, granting people magical abilities that became their primary weapon in fighting back the monsters. Despite great losses, humanity repelled the monstrous armies, and now the final battle will decide their fate. A woman arrives, informing the general that the 6 dragons are defeated, leaving only the black dragon, Vritra, collapsing to her knees in exhaustion. Tensaki groans that the heroes who fought the dragons are at their limit, leaving Agito as their last hope. The captain, looking grave, agrees that their only remaining chance lies in Agito's strength. Vritra's booming voice echoes as it acknowledges the dragon's deaths and questions if Agito dares challenge it with mere sword skills. Agito unsheathes his blade, asserting that it is not just swordsmanship he wields, vowing to defeat Vritra with all his strength. Tensaki, watching Agito's unwavering determination, explains that he lacks innate magical power and had to create his own techniques. Agito mastered the ability to imbue his sword with infinite magic drawn from the surrounding atmosphere, a feat no one else could achieve. His technique, the 8-blade swordsmanship, is now his weapon as he prepares to face Vritra head-on. Vritra dismisses Agito's efforts as foolish and conjures glowing runes, summoning a black rain of abyssal energy. Agito leaps from the ground like a bullet, moving at lightning speed, evading the attacks as he flies directly toward the dragon. Rising before Vritra, Agito unleashes Thunderbolt God, a strike from the 8-blade swordsmanship, summoning a devastating thunderbolt onto the dragon. The soldiers, including the captain and Tensaki, watch anxiously as the thunderbolt strikes, hoping it was effective. Vritra, appearing only slightly damaged, acknowledges Agito as a unique human unlike any it has encountered before. Extending its enormous wings, Vritra summons a massive blood-red rune behind it, emitting waves of overwhelming energy. The shockwaves from the rune obliterate nearby buildings. Tensaki quickly creates a magical shield and orders the general to stay behind her for protection. Witnessing the destruction, Agito acknowledges Vritra's immense strength and vows to stop holding back. Raising his sword, he closes his eyes and begins channeling the 8-blade secret technique. The technique, known as Akatsuki's 8 reincarnations, causes his sword to glow, radiating a brilliant golden light. With a battle cry, Agito surges upwards towards Vritra, shrouded in holy light, ready for a decisive clash. Reaching the dragon, Agito unleashes a barrage of strikes, his sword slashing multiple parts of Vritra's colossal body. Tensaki, observing the fierce battle, is stunned to see Agito matching the legendary Vritra blow for blow. She explains that the Akatsuki's 8 reincarnations technique absorbs elemental magic, generating explosive power while draining Agito's life. Realizing Agito is giving it all to protect her and the others, Tensaki considers finding a way out before Vritra notices them. Meanwhile, Vritra withstood every one of Agito's attacks, noting that the swordsman is nearing his limit. Spotting a faint glow from Tensaki's shield, Vritra smirks and declares that the humans' attempts at survival are futile. Tensaki panics, realizing that Vritra has discovered their location and is now targeting them. Calling the humans insignificant insects, Vritra conjures another massive rune and begins channeling an even more devastating energy attack. Breathing into the rune, Vritra duplicates it threefold, amplifying its destructive force, leaving Agito unable to dodge without endangering everyone below. Accepting his fate, Agito resolves to make the ultimate sacrifice for humanity's survival. He calls out to Tensaki, apologizing and entrusting her with protecting the rest in his absence. Tensaki, horrified by Agito's words, realizes he intends to sacrifice himself and begs him to reconsider. Vritra unleashes the black curtain of annihilation, a massive beam of dark energy that seems impossible to stop. Agito activates the full power of Akatsuki's 8 reincarnations, preparing himself for a final showdown against the overwhelming attack. Like a battle of divine and demonic forces, Agito, glowing like a holy meteor, charges headlong into the descending dark beam. The two colossal powers collide mid-air, creating a cataclysmic explosion as light and darkness clash violently. Both Agito and Vritra pour every ounce of their strength into the battle, determined to emerge victorious. Agito's attack overpowers the laser of annihilation, striking Vritra and causing a massive explosion that lights up the sky like a miniature sun. On the ground below, Tensaki maintains the shield as the golden energy washes over them. Agito looks up and observes that his attack has obliterated the entire middle section of Vritra's body. With a sickening crash, Vritra plummets to the ground, lifeless. Tensaki shouts in concern as Agito descends, staggering from exhaustion and injuries. Watching Agito collapse, Tensaki rushes forward and catches him in her lap just in time. The captain, still in shock, hesitantly asks if they have truly won. With his eyes closed and his body battered, Agito weakly confirms that he shattered Vritra's core, ensuring it will never rise again. Hearing this, the soldiers erupt into jubilant cheers, celebrating humanity's survival and victory. Overcome with emotion, the captain bursts into tears of joy. Meanwhile, Tensaki begins healing Agito with her magic, trying desperately to save him. Suddenly, a chilling and guttural voice booms out, startling Agito despite his weakened state. Oddly, no one else seems to hear the voice, as the others continue celebrating and Tensaki focuses on healing him. Speaking telepathically into Agito's mind, Vritra warns that the plan remains unchanged and that the strongest dragon god, Ragna, will now awaken. Agito is utterly stunned as he processes Vritra's ominous words. Vritra declares that, thanks to the dragon god's blessing, the 6 slain dragons will be resurrected in 100 years as its body fades away. Agito, shaken to his core, attempts to rise, but his injuries are too severe, and he collapses once more. Despite channeling all her power into healing him, Tensaki laments that her magic is failing to mend Agito's wounds. Realizing he's pushed beyond his limits, Agito feels his consciousness fading, silently begging for one more chance to fight. His vision dims, and despite his will to survive, his body succumbs, and everything turns to black. The scene shifts to a sterile hospital room where Agito is lying on a bed, connected to syringes and medical wires. Waking to the muffled noise of his surroundings, Agito slowly opens his eyes and finds himself in an unfamiliar hospital bed. A television mounted on the wall displays a program recounting the legendary day when Agito and 4 heroes saved the world. The broadcast announces that today marks the 100th anniversary of that historic battle, leaving Agito utterly stunned. Learning that an entire century has passed, Agito struggles to comprehend it, staring at his reflection in a nearby mirror and questioning if he has been reincarnated. As he watches the TV, the news reports the continuous activity of multiple gates, with 50 new gates confirmed today, hinting at the return of the 6 dragons. Hearing this, Agito recalls Vritra's foreboding words about the dragons reviving after 100 years. Connecting the dots, Agito realizes he has been reincarnated, granting him a second chance to face the impending threat. He concludes that with the dragon's return, the awakening of the dragon god, Ragna, is likely imminent. Resolving himself, Agito declares that he will shoulder the responsibility of stopping Ragna's awakening, no matter the cost. Agito has been reincarnated as a Magic Academy student who lost his parents at a young age and is now living alone. Despite the change, Agito discovers that both his current and previous last names remain exactly the same. To begin his mission, Agito declares he will inform the Sorcerers Guild about the 6 dragons and the dragon god Ragna. With a steady focus, Agito draws his sword, executes a swift strike, and sheaths it in a single motion. The soda can on the table splits cleanly in half before disintegrating into fine, crumbling strands. Confirming that his sword skills remain intact, Agito feels confident enough to move forward. As he walks through the streets, Agito notices a large screen broadcasting a press conference by the Sorcerers Guild. The media interviews a man who reassures the public that S-rank and higher personnel have been dispatched to maintain order and counter the monsters from the gates. Hearing the man's response, Agito concludes that this era's guild is more competent than in his previous life. Realizing that revealing himself to the guild too early might alert the 6 dragons, Agito decides to live inconspicuously for now. Arriving at Kagura Magic Academy, he feels fortunate to have reincarnated as a student, which makes his plans easier. He believes he can gather intelligence here and potentially form connections with the guild and high-ranking individuals. Above all, Agito knows he needs strong allies to face the 6 dragons, so he decides to find capable students and share the truth with them. In the training grounds, a student conjures a circular rune, summoning flames that spiral outward before launching a fireball. The fireball hurtles toward its target and lands a direct hit, igniting a burst of flames. Agito observes as a professor praises the student, Yamada, for showing noticeable improvement. Watching the students train, Agito is surprised by how weak they are compared to the recruits of a century ago. Heading to his classroom, Agito feels disappointed, realizing his plan to recruit strong allies might not proceed smoothly. Lost in thought, he pushes the door open and is immediately addressed by someone inside. A typical high school bully, flanked by 2 lackeys, smirks and asks if Agito has recovered from his injuries. Rising from his seat, the bully mockingly claims he was worried Agito might vanish after spending a month in the hospital. Sticking out his abnormally large tongue, the bully sneers that if Agito disappeared, they'd lose their favorite victim. The bully's crude remarks even make the other students in the classroom cringe in discomfort. Agito, unfazed by the insults, feels relieved that his true identity has not been exposed. Deciding to play along, Agito apologizes and pretends not to remember them, asking who they are. Grabbing Agito by the collar, the bully introduces himself as Yuki Hibaha, a proud A-rank student. Without warning, Yuki Hibaha kicks Agito in the stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. Agito, momentarily stunned, reflects on the excessive bullying this body had endured. Approaching Agito, Yuki Hibaha calls him a filthy dropout and warns him to stay in his place as a lowly worm. Yuki Hibaha continues mocking Agito, his antics drawing even more disgust from the onlookers. Noticing Agito's sword, Yuki Hibaha smirks and comments that the rusty blade suits him perfectly. Refusing to stop, Yuki Hibaha grabs Agito by the back of his collar, continuing to hurl insults. Letting out a heavy sigh, Agito realizes that his reincarnated self had been hospitalized due to Yuki Hibaha's bullying. Irritated, Agito slaps Yuki Hibaha's hand away and calmly says he has no time for such trivialities. Agito advises Yuki Hibaha to focus on improving his skills rather than wasting time bullying others. The classroom falls silent, and the other students stare in shock at Agito's bold response. Enraged, Yuki Hibaha's flames ignite around him as he demands to know if Agito has a death wish. Feeling the rising heat, the onlookers grow visibly uneasy. Yuki Hibaha raises his hand and declares he will grant Agito his wish to die, preparing to launch an attack. As the tension escalates, some students flee the classroom, but Agito remains steadfast. With his face twisted in fury, Yuki Hibaha hurls a blazing orb of flames directly at Agito. Drawing his sword, Agito unleashes the 8-blade swordsmanship technique, slashing through the orb and dispersing it with a shockwave that knocks Yuki Hibaha backward. Witnessing Agito nullify the attack so effortlessly, the other students are left speechless in awe. Even Yuki Hibaha is stunned, questioning whether this Agito is the same person he once tormented. Convinced it must be a fluke, Yuki Hibaha stands up and prepares to attack again. Before he can act, a girl named Amazaki Erika, an A-rank student, enters the classroom, demanding that he stop. Irritated by her interruption, Yuki Hibaha asks Amazaki why she's interfering. While Agito watches her closely, the other students whisper in surprise, remarking that Amazaki has returned early from her overseas expedition. Drawing her sword, Amazaki reprimands Yuki Hibaha for resorting to bullying weaker students. Yuki Hibaha summons another flame orb, but Amazaki swiftly slices through it with her sword. Sternly, Amazaki warns Yuki Hibaha that if he doesn't stop, she will deal with him herself. Clicking his tongue in frustration, Yuki Hibaha begrudgingly leaves the classroom with his lackeys. As Amazaki sighs in relief, the other girls swarm around her, showering her with admiration. Meanwhile, Agito wonders if Amazaki could be a descendant of Tensaki and contemplates sharing his secret with her. Outside on the academy grounds, Yuki Hibaha curses furiously, his fists clenched in rage. Unleashing flames from his hands, he scorches a nearby tree, shouting about his humiliation. With a vengeful glare, Yuki Hibaha vows to eliminate both Agito and Amazaki. High above the academy, a man is hovering ominously, observing and declaring his intent to eliminate the bloodline of the heroes. Introducing himself as Odium, the sub-commander of the 6 dragons, he focuses on Agito as an unexpected anomaly. With a sinister laugh, Odium proclaims that Lord Rubel's revival is imminent and promises to personally deal with Agito in the meantime. Yuki Hibaha is still consumed by anger, unable to forget the humiliation inflicted upon him by Agito and Amazaki. He tells his sidekicks to confront the two after school, but they remind him of Amazaki's formidable strength. However, Yuki Hibaha remains resolute in his desire for revenge, declaring that anyone who looks down on him will not be spared. At that moment, Odium suddenly appears, clapping his hands as he praises Yuki Hibaha's twisted spirit as being splendid. Startled by the sudden appearance, Yuki Hibaha demands to know who Odium is. Suddenly, Yuki Hibaha feels an overwhelming pressure and a suffocating aura as Odium introduces himself. Odium then commands Yuki Hibaha to swear loyalty to him and provide his assistance. Before Yuki Hibaha can respond, Odium grabs his head with a bare hand and begins infusing him with some kind of dark mana. A sinister symbol appears on Yuki Hibaha's neck, and he collapses to his knees, leaving his sidekicks alarmed and terrified. Now under Odium's control, with his eyes glowing red, Yuki Hibaha turns to face his sidekicks, making them tremble in fear. With ruthless efficiency, Yuki Hibaha attacks his sidekicks, incinerating them as if they were nothing more than flies. Watching the carnage unfold, Odium smiles with satisfaction and declares that his plans can now begin, as he has acquired his pawn. Later that day, the students gather in front of the C-rank gate located at the 3rd peak of Skull Mountain for a field test. Their professor informs them that they can work alone or in teams, but each must defeat at least 5 monsters within the dungeon. Hearing this, Agito doubts whether the other students, who seem so weak, can even defeat a single monster. Spotting Amazaki, he thanks her for her help, and she reassures him it was no trouble. With a bright smile, Amazaki tells Agito to let her know if anyone causes him trouble in the future. She remarks that bullies target the weak and would never dare challenge a descendant of the 4 great heroes who fought alongside the Sword Saint. Hearing this, Agito reflects on how those allies from a century ago must have led happy lives after the battles. Seeing Agito lost in thought, Amazaki asks what's on his mind, leaving him momentarily flustered. Amazaki eyes him suspiciously, recalling that the technique he displayed earlier wasn't magic. She is certain it wasn't Yuki Hibaha's failed spellcasting either and believes it was unmistakably swordsmanship. Knowing that only one person ever mastered such techniques, the 8-blade sword saint from 100 years ago, her suspicions grow. Overwhelmed by doubt, Amazaki wonders who Agito might truly be. Moments later, the students enter the dungeon and immediately encounter a massive ogre blocking their path. Working together, they unleash a barrage of magic and skills at the ogre, but their attacks barely leave a mark. The ogre retaliates with a powerful swing of its club, sending the students sprawling to the ground. Raising its club high, the ogre prepares to crush the students beneath its massive weight. Just in time, Agito appears and, with a single swing of his sword, slices the ogre cleanly in half. He asks the fallen students if they are unharmed, ensuring they are safe. The students are stunned, unable to comprehend how Agito defeated the ogre with a single strike. With a casual wave, Agito decides to explore a different direction and complete the field test on his own. After wandering for some time, he stumbles upon a gruesome scene of carnage. Scattered before him are the mangled corpses of monsters, sliced apart as though they were mere vegetables. Standing amidst the massacre is Yuki Hibaha, his hands and clothes soaked in blood. Agito watches curiously as Yuki Hibaha notices him and turns his bloodstained face toward him. With a shrill screech, Yuki Hibaha charges at Agito, his flaming fist aimed straight at him. Yuki Hibaha throws a flurry of punches, but Agito dodges them with ease, noticing that his magical power has been greatly amplified. However, Agito also finds Yuki Hibaha's movements to be unnatural and erratic. As Yuki Hibaha attempts to grab him, Agito raises his sword, forcing Yuki Hibaha to grip the sharp blade instead. Blood pours from Yuki Hibaha's injured palm, yet he shows no signs of pain or hesitation. Drooling uncontrollably, Yuki Hibaha mutters in a low, broken voice, pleading for Agito's help. Agito is thrown into a flashback, recalling the 4 great heroes and the mountain of human corpses from a century ago. Gritting his teeth in realization, Agito lifts 2 fingers glowing with holy light and prepares to act. Placing his fingers on Yuki Hibaha's forehead, he purges the dark symbol from his neck. As Yukihira collapses, Agito catches him, gently breaking his fall. Tears stream silently from Yukihira's eyes as he regains his senses. Agito addresses the unseen culprit, daring them to reveal themselves, while carefully laying Yukihira on the ground. Accepting the challenge, Odium emerges from the shadows and introduces himself with a sinister grin. Raising his hand, Odium summons a dark rune above his palm, declaring that the 6 dragons will soon fully awaken. The rune multiplies, forming a circle of dozens around Agito, trapping him in a deadly formation. With a malevolent grin, Odium announces that he will now execute Agito. Flames erupt from the runes, hurtling toward Agito with deadly intent. Agito reacts swiftly, slicing through the flames as effortlessly as cutting through air. Odium is visibly shocked, completely unprepared for such a swift and powerful response. Tightening his grip on his sword, Agito declares that while the 6 dragons may be nearing resurrection, he will not allow Odium's schemes to succeed. With a sinister grin, Odium mocks Agito's boldness and points his hand, firing a barrage of magic bullets toward him. As the magic bullets explode around him, Agito moves with lightning speed, evading each one with precision. Charging at Odium, Agito swings his sword, but Odium intercepts the attack with his massive claws. Agito questions Odium's vendetta against humanity, demanding to know why he seeks to harm them. With a shrill laugh, Odium replies that tormenting humans brings him immense joy. Both combatants leap back several feet, creating space between them to reassess their next moves. Odium once again casts his spell, unleashing another wave of magic bullets, but Agito leaps high into the air, dodging them effortlessly. Chuckling, Odium comments that true hunters give their prey a sense of escape before striking. He recounts a tale from a century ago, describing how he let a mother and child flee, only to corner them when they felt safe. With a twisted smile, Odium gleefully explains how he mind-controlled the mother, forcing her to strangle her own child. Hearing such a revolting story, Agito feels a surge of disgust and anger. Odium mocks Agito's reaction, saying those moments were some of the most exhilarating experiences of his life. He boasts that once the dragon god awakens, he will relive that thrill on an even grander scale. Declaring that he won't let Agito interfere with his plans, Odium bursts into maniacal laughter. In a split second, Agito dashes past Odium, delivering a swift slash that severs his left arm before Odium can react. Turning slightly, Agito coldly tells Odium to stop talking, remarking that his voice is unbearably annoying. Odium lets out a piercing scream of pain as blood gushes from the stump where his arm used to be. Ignoring his injury, Odium recklessly charges at Agito, embodying the stubbornness of villains. He swings his enormous claws wildly in every direction, but Agito dodges the attacks with ease. Roaring with fury, Odium declares that humans are worthless beings destined to be hunted. As he continues his relentless assault, raising his remaining arm, Odium summons an enormous dark rune in the air, vowing to reduce Agito to ashes. From the rune, a massive storm of flames shaped like meteors rains down toward Agito with devastating force. Assessing the magnitude of the attack, Agito realizes the dungeon and the gate itself could be destroyed. Deciding to go all out, he employs the 8-blade swordsmanship, unleashing the rending skyblade technique. As the flaming meteors descend, Agito's precise air slices cut them apart, preventing a single one from touching the ground. One of Agito's strikes even grazes Odium, catching him completely off guard. Shocked, Odium's eyes widen as he recognizes the legendary swordsmanship Agito is using. Severely wounded, Odium collapses to the ground, letting out a faint groan of pain. Smirking through his agony, Odium remarks that Agito's technique matches the one that obliterated demons a century ago, wielded by the Sword Saint. Odium reveals he had heard of the Sword Saint's death in battle and questions if Agito has been reincarnated. With a tired sigh, Agito calmly states that there's no point in answering someone who is about to be defeated. Odium bursts into crazed laughter, realizing that the reincarnated Sword Saint stands before him. Still laughing, Odium taunts Agito, claiming he must be truly unlucky to reincarnate only to meet his end today. Covering his face with his remaining hand, Odium lets out a bone-chilling roar of anguish, startling Agito. Before Agito's eyes, Odium begins transforming, starting with sharp fangs replacing his teeth. His remaining hand morphs into a monstrous claw, and his legs grow disproportionately large. Agito watches in silence as Odium completes his transformation into a towering, demon-like beast. Lifting his head, Odium lets out an ear-splitting roar, sending shockwaves through the dungeon and causing debris to rain from the ceiling. Agito steadies himself, raising his guard as the ground trembles beneath him. Stomping his massive feet, Odium shrieks with laughter, declaring that he will show no mercy this time. He also reveals that he has invoked the blessing of the dragon god to enhance his power. Raising his sword, Agito meets Odium's declaration with resolve, promising to end the battle here and now. Odium's roar sends shockwaves through the dungeon, making Amazaki and the others feel the ground tremble. Fearing the dungeon might collapse from the immense magical power, Amazaki runs toward the source, urging the others to escape. She traces the overwhelming magic to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon, her determination unwavering. After running for a while, she finally spots Agito and Odium standing a few feet apart, their stances ready for a fierce clash. Both Odium and Agito notice Amazaki watching them, her presence not going unnoticed. Realizing his identity is now exposed, Agito decides to finish the fight quickly without any delays. Suddenly, Odium charges at Agito with his clawed hand raised high, aiming to strike with overwhelming force. With immense speed, Agito dodges the attack and counters by slashing his sword at Odium in one swift movement. Amazaki watches in amazement as a small cut appears on Odium's cheek, with blood droplets trickling down. Out of nowhere, deep gashes begin to form all over Odium's body, and he lets out a horrifying screech of pain. Agito mocks Odium's powers, calling them a disappointment since only his physical strength has improved. Despite his wounds, Odium begins laughing maniacally as his injuries heal instantly before their eyes. Both Amazaki and Agito are stunned by the speed of Odium's regeneration. Still grinning, Odium claims that with the divine dragon's blessing, such swordsmanship is useless as he fires dozens of magic bullets. Agito moves in a zigzag pattern, dodging the barrage of attacks as they explode on either side of him. Amazaki stands frozen, realizing Odium's strength is enough to challenge even an S-rank hero. Odium vanishes and reappears before Agito, catching him off guard for a moment, but Agito quickly blocks Odium's claw with perfect timing. Agito is momentarily surprised by how much stronger Odium has become now, as he leaps backwards avoiding another attack. Odium relentlessly swings his claws at Agito, who counters every attack with equal precision and strength. Mockingly, Odium calls Agito a relic of the past who foolishly believed he had saved the world when he died. Amazaki yells out words of encouragement to Agito, hoping to boost his morale. Odium raises his hand for a devastating attack and brings it down with all his might, aiming to pierce through Agito. Remaining calm, Agito waits until the last second before slicing through Odium's fingers with a single precise stroke. Amazaki and Odium are both shocked as blood pours from Odium's hand and a deep cut forms across his stomach. Overwhelmed by the damage, Odium collapses to his knees, attempting to regenerate the wound but failing due to its depth. Agito agrees with Odium's earlier insult, admitting he is not a hero anymore since the peace they fought for only lasted a century. Clutching his sword tightly, Agito declares this time will be different, vowing to ensure history does not repeat itself. For the sake of his fallen comrades and their descendants, Agito promises to protect the world with all his might. Enraged by Agito's words, Odium charges forward again, but Agito stops him effortlessly with a single arm. Completely baffled, Odium cannot comprehend how Agito is overpowering him with such ease. Filled with denial, Odium refuses to accept defeat at the hands of someone he considers a relic of the past. Overcome by rage, Odium channels all his strength into his legs, trying to push Agito back with sheer force. Agito points his sword at Odium's chest, halting him mid-charge and rendering him immobile. Using the piercing moon technique, Agito slashes through Odium in one powerful strike, leaving him gravely injured. Blood gushes from Odium's mouth as his monstrous transformation reverses, revealing his weakened, fragile body. The regenerated arm disintegrates like paper, leaving Odium even more vulnerable. Having defeated Odium, Agito stands tall and unshakable, exuding a powerful, heroic aura. Sheathing his sword, Agito turns as Amazaki approaches him, calling out his name. With a stern expression, Amazaki demands to know who Agito truly is, her voice filled with suspicion. Meanwhile, in the Chubu region of Japan, outside a special gate known as Abyss, an S-rank hero named Tomalina reports Odium's death to the guild master. The guild master, speaking over the call, speculates that this confirms the possible revival of the 6 dragons. With a sigh, Lena asks if their next mission involves locating the 6 dragons and requests additional backup. The guild master assures her that Agito is being considered for backup since he defeated Odium single-handedly. Lena curiously examines Agito's profile, intrigued by the mysterious swordsman's abilities. Seated atop an iceberg, S-rank hero Udo Riku calls the information unbelievable, doubting its accuracy. Riku argues that someone without magic cannot defeat Odium using only a sword and dismisses the report as a mistake. The guild master instructs both heroes to verify Agito's skills and determine if the reports are true. If Agito's power is genuine, the guild master orders them to recruit him to their elite guild, Seraphim. Sighing reluctantly, Riku agrees to check on Agito and tells Lina to handle the remaining reports. Suddenly, dozens of large flying creatures approach Riku, their presence filling the air with menace. Unfazed, Riku raises his hand, crackling with electricity, and unleashes a thunderous attack. The creatures are electrocuted in a single powerful strike, dropping from the sky like scorched rain. Smirking confidently, Riku declares that he will now see for himself whether Agito's strength is real. Back at the academy, Amazaki and Agito gather at the training grounds. Amazaki is shocked as Agito reveals he is the reincarnated Gakken Agito from 10 years ago and explains the 6 dragons are set to reincarnate. Agito confirms everything is true, leaving Amazaki feeling that the situation is insane. Normally, Amazaki would dismiss such claims as ridiculous, but she witnessed Agito's extraordinary sword techniques back in the dungeon. The way Agito defeated Odium is something she cannot explain unless he is truly the sword saint himself. Left with no other choice, Amazaki sighs and agrees to believe Agito's story but imposes one condition. Her condition is that Agito must allow her to fight alongside him in the battle against the 6 dragons. She states that she also wants to help protect the world and make a difference in this fight. Furthermore, she adds that she cannot stand by idly and watch as the world crumbles into chaos. Hearing Amazaki's determination and the tone of her voice, Agito is reminded of Tensaki, who had the same indomitable spirit in the past. With a warm smile, Agito tells Amazaki that she truly must be descended from Tensaki. Seeing Amazaki's puzzled expression, Agito quickly retracts his words, leaving her in confusion. Amazaki shifts the conversation by asking Agito what his next plan will be moving forward. Agito states that they need to gather allies and form a strong team, just like the 4 legendary heroes from 100 years ago. After a moment of thought, Amazaki suggests that the Seraphim might be able to help them. She explains that the Seraphim is a team primarily composed of the guild's S-rank members, tasked with investigating gate anomalies. Amazaki mentions that during her time overseas, she assisted with their research as a Seraphim candidate. Hearing this, Agito feels his hope reignite as he thinks about the possibility of having strong allies to rely on. However, Agito voices his concern, unsure if the Seraphim would believe their story, but Amazaki assures him it will be fine. She points out that the Seraphim are a diverse group who dedicate their lives to protecting others, regardless of circumstances. Because of this, Amazaki feels confident that the Seraphim will side with Agito in their battle. Learning about this, Agito feels relieved knowing that such selfless heroes still exist in the current era. He begins to look forward to fighting alongside people of such strength. Amazaki remarks that some of these heroes might have unique personality quirks, but before she can elaborate further, Agito senses danger. Out of nowhere, a lightning bolt comes hurling toward them, which Agito effortlessly deflects with a swift swing of his sword. Amazaki is completely stunned by this, her jaw dropping in disbelief. Agito calmly notes that they have a visitor as a figure descends from the sky amidst a storm of lightning and thunder. As the dust settles, Riku steps forward, wearing an impressed expression as he remarks that Agito might indeed be capable. Amazaki recognizes Riku immediately and shouts his name, prompting Agito to ask if she knows him. Amazaki explains that Riku is an S-rank guild member and one of the world's most skilled lightning magic users. She also notes that Riku is a key member of the Seraphim. Facing Agito, Riku comments that he heard about Agito defeating Odium, the deputy of the 6 dragons, all by himself. Riku then reveals that he once defeated someone who claimed to be a deputy of the 6 dragons, but turned out to be a weakling. Suggesting that Agito might also be a fraud, Riku warns him to prepare for his abilities to be tested. Raising his hand toward Agito, Riku summons glowing magic circles, signaling the start of his test. Amazaki immediately recognizes the spell as one meant for large monsters or dragons and panics at it being aimed at a person. Riku coldly instructs Agito to withstand his attack if he wants to be considered a candidate for the Seraphim. He adds that if Agito fails, he will be reported to the guild as a weakling with no real potential. Agito, unfazed, smirks and raises his sword, daring Riku to proceed with the attack. Without hesitation, Riku unleashes a powerful bolt of lightning that crackles through the air as it speeds toward Agito. Agito. Clutching his sword tightly, Agito focuses entirely on the incoming attack and swings his blade with precision, causing a brilliant explosion. Riku watches in astonishment while Amazaki closes her eyes to shield herself from the intense light. As the smoke clears, Agito stands unscathed and victorious, having completely neutralized the powerful attack. Amazaki opens her eyes and is left speechless, while Riku grins, seemingly impressed with Agito's abilities. Agito acknowledges the immense raw power Riku demonstrated and expresses his respect for the Lightning Mage's talents. With newfound admiration, Agito asks Riku to join him as his comrade in the battles to come. Upon being offered to become Agito's comrade, Riku exclaims with excitement that Agito is indeed an interesting person. Putting an arm around Agito, Riku declares that Agito should instead join him as a comrade, not the other way around. Agito remarks that Riku wasn't serious and didn't use his full power during the attack, which leaves Riku shocked as he has no idea how Agito figured it out. Agito explains that if Riku had been serious and gone all out, the entire area around them would have been obliterated. He further adds that there aren't many mages of Riku's caliber in existence. Impressed that Agito saw through everything, Riku concludes that Agito must be on par with an S-rank hero. Extending his hand, Riku declares that from this day onward, Agito will be a member of the Seraphim's special forces. Agito agrees to join Seraphim if it means they can work together and asks if Amazaki is part of the group as well. Turning toward Amazaki, Agito asks her if she is also a Seraphim candidate. However, Riku sternly declares that this will never happen. He claims that after reviewing the mission logs from the North American branch, he found that Amazaki's magic power is not very high. Riku adds that Amazaki is no expert in swordsmanship either. Concluding his assessment, Riku declares that Amazaki is nowhere near his or Agito's level. To make things worse, he bluntly tells Amazaki that she is not qualified to join the Seraphim. With this final remark, Riku asks Amazaki if she understands that this is for the best. Amazaki doesn't respond initially, bowing her head in silence. After a moment, she admits that while she had confidence in her skills at the academy, she agrees she is not yet strong enough to join Seraphim. Smiling, Agito asks Amazaki if that's truly what she believes. Riku, puzzled by Agito's question, wonders what he is trying to say. Agito confidently declares that he will vouch for Amazaki because she has hidden talent that even she hasn't realized yet. Hearing this, Amazaki is completely taken aback. Riku questions what kind of hidden talent Amazaki could possibly have that hasn't already surfaced. He confidently asserts that anything Amazaki can do, he can do better. Agito disagrees, pointing out that there's a certain area in which Amazaki even surpasses Riku. Amazaki is left completely confused, having no idea what Agito is talking about. Riku mentions that thousands of mages on missions lose their lives every year. He reminds them that while decades have passed since the war ended, the gates and monsters still pose a constant threat. Despite the Sword Saint and the 4 great heroes driving the 6 dragons back, people continue to die during investigations and subjugations. Riku explains that Seraphim was ultimately established to prevent such bloodshed and protect lives. He questions how Agito can recommend someone like Amazaki. Knowing all of this, Agito firmly stands by his words, declaring that Amazaki possesses S-rank level skill and would fit perfectly in Seraphim. Stammering slightly, Amazaki admits that Riku is right and that she doesn't have any special talents that she knows of. At that moment, Lina enters, pointing out that if Amazaki truly had hidden power, signs of it would have appeared much earlier. Amazaki is startled to see Lina and reacts with surprise. Lina mentions that she and Amazaki are old acquaintances, and the two stare at each other for a few moments. Agito senses Lina's power and concludes that she must be quite skilled. Lina suggests they allow Amazaki to join their next investigation mission, where they can witness her skills firsthand. Waving his hand dismissively, Riku refuses, saying it would be too troublesome. Agito proposes a simpler solution, challenging Riku and Lina to a duel against him and Amazaki. Hearing the challenge, Lina and Riku begin radiating powerful auras and ask if Agito is underestimating them. Realizing Agito is serious, Lina agrees, suggesting they use the training grounds at headquarters for the duel. She explains that when S-ranks fight seriously, the collateral damage can be immense. Riku agrees with her suggestion. Cracking his knuckles, Riku admits he has been waiting for a chance to go all out against Agito. Agito states that neither side will hold back, and Riku smirks in agreement. Amazaki, however, remains concerned, but Agito assures her that everything will be fine and reminds her of her hidden strength. Turning to Amazaki, Agito encourages her to trust him and fight by his side. Inspired by Agito's belief in her, Amazaki gains confidence and agrees to give it her all. Drawing her sword, Amazaki boldly declares that she will showcase her true power in the duel. Pleased with Amazaki's newfound determination, Agito remarks that the two of them will defeat the S ranks together. At the Magician's Guild base, Agito and Amazaki stand ready to face Riku and Lina in the upcoming duel. Several officials observe from above, their eyes on the massive arena below as they discuss the significance of the match. One official turns to Jinguji, the boss seated at his desk, asking his thoughts, and he replies that only the fight will reveal the truth. Jinguji admits his focus is on Agito, as rumors suggest Agito defeated a lieutenant of the Six Dragons single-handedly. He expresses his eagerness to witness Agito's abilities firsthand to validate the claim. Agito looks around in curiosity as a barrier begins forming around the four contestants to contain the destructive power of their attacks. Amazaki explains that the barrier is powered by an artificial machine, which is why it takes time to activate. Lina interjects, stating that Tensaki, who fought alongside the Sword Saint, could conjure her own defensive spells, while machines only imitate those techniques. Agito notes that if someone could replicate defensive magic as strong as Tensaki's, they would be valuable in the current era. Lina looks puzzled and begins to ask what he means, but Riku interrupts impatiently, saying there's no need for idle chatter. Riku asserts that the battle will make everything clear, and Agito nods in agreement, expressing his anticipation for the fight. A countdown begins, 4, 3, 2, and as it hits 1, the battle officially starts, with all four participants leaping backward to create distance. Riku swiftly charges his magic, and the audience watches in awe as he unleashes the Judgment Ray, sending powerful bolts of lightning at Agito and Amazaki. Jinguji observes with surprise, noting that Riku wasted no time going on the offensive. Drawing his sword, Agito reassures Amazaki to trust him and rushes forward to meet the attack. With precise and fluid movements, Agito slashes through the air, nullifying the lightning bolts coming his way. The spectators are left in stunned silence, their mouths agape at Agito's incredible display of skill. Agito remains calm even as Riku suddenly lunges at him with a lightning blade, which Agito blocks effortlessly with his sword. Agito comments with excitement that he didn't know Riku could manifest blades from lightning. Smiling confidently, Riku boasts that as an S rank, there's nothing beyond his abilities. Riku continues his relentless assault, striking at Agito repeatedly, though Agito defends each attack with remarkable ease. At one point, Riku gains an advantage, pushing Agito back several feet with sheer force. Sensing his dominance, Riku laughs mockingly, just as Lina raises her hand and begins murmuring an incantation. She summons dozens of razor-sharp ice crystals in front of her, ready to launch them at her opponents. Agito watches with admiration, impressed by Lina's mastery over high-level magic. Plunging his sword into the ground, Agito unleashes the breaking grounds technique, causing massive boulders to rise and deflect Lina's ice crystals. The powerful clash triggers a warning, prompting Jinguji to shout orders to strengthen the barrier surrounding the arena. The team increases the barrier to level 6, and Jinguji marvels at how such hidden potential is now being revealed. Still smiling during his exchange with Lina, Agito compliments her outstanding abilities. Lina, however, retorts that it should be her praising him, warning that his focus on her might leave Amazaki vulnerable. Amazaki silently makes intricate gestures with her fingers, preparing to activate her own spell. Riku acknowledges Amazaki's resolve and begins forming a massive orb of lightning, preparing to unleash his full power on her. Amazaki stands her ground, maintaining her stance as Riku fires the whirling lightning orb directly at her. Calmly, Amazaki closes her eyes and starts chanting, forming a mysterious barrier around herself. Jinguji leaps to his feet in astonishment, shouting that the spell Amazaki is using looks strangely familiar. He declares that the spell is a legendary technique countless magicians have attempted to replicate, one that Tensaki, the hero, had perfected. With her arms raised, Amazaki completes the barrier just as the lightning orb crashes down upon her. Both Riku and Lina watch in utter disbelief as Amazaki successfully neutralizes the devastating attack. Still stunned, Lina struggles to comprehend what just happened, while Riku exclaims in amazement that Amazaki blocked his spell. Agito reminds them both that he had already stated Amazaki possessed untapped potential. He then declares that now is the perfect time for their counterattack to begin. A few hours before the duel, Agito had called Amazaki to his room to discuss their battle strategy. Both of them sit cross-legged on the floor, facing each other across a small table, while Amazaki looks visibly nervous. Agito mentions wanting to talk about her talents, but Amazaki's overactive imagination assumes he might ask her out, making her even more anxious. She wonders if this meeting could be a date and struggles to calm her nerves while trying to act composed. However, when Agito calls her name, she gets startled. Agito informs her that she has inherited the power of her great-grandmother, leaving Amazaki confused. Amazaki, puzzled, asks Agito what he means by her great-grandmother's power. Agito explains that her talent lies in defensive magic, and her great-grandmother was none other than Tensaki, a legendary hero from a century ago. Shocked, Amazaki stares at her hands, wondering if she truly possesses the same abilities as Tensaki. Agito further elaborates that although she has inherited the power, it may take years to awaken fully. Concerned, Amazaki asks if there's any way to speed up the awakening of her power. Agito stands and moves behind her, placing one hand on her upper back and the other on her lower spine. Without warning, Agito cracks her spine, startling Amazaki, who screams in fright. She quickly scrambles away, glaring at him and warning him not to touch her without permission again. Returning to her spot reluctantly, Amazaki observes as Agito resumes what he was doing. Moments later, Amazaki feels a surge of golden energy coursing through her body, leaving her astonished. Agito informs her that he has temporarily activated her latent magic, enabling her to perform basic defensive spells. He also reminds her that she must train diligently if she wants the activation to become permanent. Determined, Amazaki vows to work hard, and Agito praises her resolve. With their discussion concluded, Agito confidently suggests they focus on defeating the two S-rank heroes. Fast forward to the present, Amazaki has successfully used her newly awakened magic to create a defensive barrier. Both Riku and Lina are left stunned, while the audience erupts into cheers, amazed by the unexpected display of skill. Jinguji stands abruptly, shocked by the magic Amazaki just performed. He is even more surprised that Agito recognized Amazaki's hidden potential when no one else could, which elevates his respect for Agito. With Amazaki's ability now proven, Agito declares it's his turn to counterattack. Drawing his sword, charging at Riku and Lina, Agito swings his sword while simultaneously releasing waves of lightning at them. Riku, impressed by the dual attack, commends Agito, but Lina urges him to focus and launches a flurry of ice crystals at Agito. Amazaki quickly summons barriers to shield both herself and Agito, deflecting the crystals successfully. Seeing her attack blocked, Lina appears surprised by Amazaki's skill. Raising his arms, Riku conjures two massive lightning spheres and hurls them with immense force. Agito instructs Amazaki to be ready, and she confidently assures him she is prepared. Lifting her hands, Amazaki creates a powerful shield that withstands the lightning spheres, shocking Riku. Amazaki then redirects the lightning spheres back at Riku, who casually stops them with a single hand. Acknowledging her skill, Riku admits Amazaki's magic is impressive for defense. With renewed confidence, Amazaki starts to believe victory is within their grasp. Lina summons another wave of crystals and launches them at Amazaki with precision. Amazaki counters by generating multiple shields, not only blocking the attack but also deflecting some crystals back at Lina. Her successful defense reinforces Amazaki's belief that they can win this duel. Meanwhile, Riku and Agito engage in a fierce sword fight, their blades clashing with unrelenting intensity. With a smirk, Agito asks Riku how Amazaki is doing, and Riku, laughing, admits she has become quite formidable. Declaring he won't hold back, Riku manipulates the electric field around them, creating a magnetic force that lifts both Agito and Amazaki into the air. The sudden shift separates Agito and Amazaki, placing them at a disadvantage. Agito lands on one knee and quickly deduces Riku's plan from the situation. Riku signals Lina to proceed, and she creates a massive crystal cage that splits the arena into two sections. The cage divides the arena, placing the girls in one section and the boys in another, isolating them for separate battles. Agito marvels at the craftsmanship of the crystal cage and asks Riku if this was his plan all along. Riku confirms his strategy, stating he wanted a one-on-one battle with Agito without any interference. He also ensures the girls can battle without interruptions, leaving each pair to fight independently. With a serious expression, Riku clenches his fist, declaring that talent alone won't defeat an S-rank like him or Lina, lightning crackling around him. Agito responds confidently, stating that he has no intention of losing due to a lack of experience. Boldly, he then declares that both he and Amazaki will emerge victorious against Riku and Lina. With a loud shout, Amazaki leaps into the air and lunges at Lina, raising her sword high to attack. Lina easily dodges the sword and jumps backward to create distance before shooting ice crystals. Reacting quickly, Amazaki manages to deflect the ice crystals by summoning a shield before her. Raising her hand high above, Lina conjures a massive ice crystal, 3 times the size of her body. Looking concerned, Amazaki braces herself as Lina hurls the enormous crystal directly at her. To counter the attack, Amazaki summons a barrier shield, which absorbs the force of the crystal as it slams into it. Seeing her attack blocked, Lina appears slightly surprised. Amazaki prepares a counterattack by conjuring a magic rune and infusing it into her sword, enhancing its power. Swinging her enchanted sword, Amazaki sends a powerful air blade, crackling with lightning, forcing Lina to jump to dodge it. Lina quickly realizes that Amazaki can block her attacks and counter effectively. Clutching her sword tightly, Amazaki charges straight at Lina, aiming to close the distance and disrupt her spellcasting advantage. Thrusting her sword toward Lina, Amazaki is shocked as the blade passes through Lina, as though she were made of gas. While Amazaki stands stunned, Lina, now behind her, remarks that she is far too soft. Seizing the opportunity, Lina casts an avalanche spell, producing massive chunks of ice that she launches at Amazaki. Realizing she's been tricked, Amazaki quickly turns around and forms a barrier at the last second. The barrier successfully stops the ice from engulfing her and freezing her completely. Exhausted and breathing heavily, Amazaki begins to understand just how powerful Lina is as an S-rank hero. With a superior tone, Lina suggests that Amazaki should surrender instead of growing desperate. Hearing Lina's condescending remark, Amazaki remains silent for a moment, her expression growing serious. Breaking her silence, Amazaki admits that she almost gave up on herself not long ago. Lina listens as Amazaki shares how she trained every day with all her effort but never saw herself grow stronger. Amazaki explains that seeing Agito fight a powerful opponent selflessly to protect others inspired her to change. Tightening her grip on her sword, Amazaki declares that she wants to grow stronger to protect others too. Fueled by determination, a golden aura begins to surge around Amazaki as she vows to never stop trying, no matter the odds. Lina asks Amazaki if she really believes sheer effort alone can change the future. Channeling her power, Lina tells Amazaki that she is gravely mistaken. Rising into the air, Lina summons a whirlwind of frost and snow, creating a literal avalanche around her. Amazaki shields her face, struggling to move under the immense pressure. Looking down at Amazaki, Lina tells her that the present and future are shaped by the past and insists she must reconcile with it to move forward. Declaring that she won't let Amazaki advance until then, Lina begins casting a spell. She unleashes a skill called Cositus, Absolute Zero, creating swirling white ribbons of snow that merge together. Directing the attack at Amazaki, Lina sends the devastating spell hurtling toward her. Dropping her sword, Amazaki raises her hands and prepares to form a barrier. Instead of forming a barrier around herself, Amazaki creates one around Lina, trapping her and her attack inside. Before Lina can react, the barrier fully materializes, sealing her and her magic within. The spell Lina cast begins bouncing off the walls of the barrier, unable to escape. Amazaki concentrates intensely to maintain the barrier and keep Lina trapped. The barrier is impervious to magic, rendering Lina unable to attack as long as it remains intact. By using her wits instead of brute strength, Amazaki successfully neutralizes even an S-rank magic attack. Observing Amazaki's clever strategy, Jinguji feels both astonished and deeply impressed. Meanwhile, Lina's own attack continues ricocheting within the barrier, hurtling back toward her. Raising her hand, Lina calmly neutralizes the attack before it can harm her. Though slightly fatigued, Amazaki remains focused on maintaining the barrier. Lina's eyes glow blue as her expression grows serious, her frustration with Amazaki evident. Sensing Lina about to lose control, Jinguji shouts to declare the match over. Lina tries to reason, but Jinguji warns her not to lose focus and announces that their investigation of the 6 dragons will begin, with Amazaki joining as a Seraphim member. Reluctantly, Lina raises her hand and declares her surrender, signaling the end of the battle. Amazaki is surprised that she finally won as she releases the barrier and frees Lina. Landing on the ground, Lina congratulates Amazaki, who humbly thanks her in return. As Lina walks past, she remarks that Amazaki's strength would have been useful back then. Amazaki watches Lina leave, clenching her hand near her chest, visibly emotional. Meanwhile, on the other side of the arena, Agito and Riku are locked in an intense duel, slashing at each other midair. The icy cage around them begins to fade as they realize Lina has withdrawn from the fight. Surprised by Amazaki's victory, Riku curiously asks Agito about the magic she used to win. Agito replies, raising a finger, that all he did was provide Amazaki ability with proper guidance. Laughing, Riku admits that Agito is truly intriguing but declares he will not lose to him. Getting serious, Riku vows to go all out and win, prompting Agito to confidently dare him to try. With a shock, Jinguji realizes what is about to happen and shouts at Riku to stop before he destroys the entire headquarters. With a smirk, Agito mocks Riku, asking what he plans to do, causing Riku to laugh loudly and dismiss Jinguji's warning as nonsense. Riku begins releasing a strong aura around him, channeling his full strength, with strands of lightning crackling in the air. With focused eyes, Riku lets out a loud shout, resembling a Super Saiyan transformation like Goku, causing his aura to intensify and multiply tenfold. Even Agito feels the immense pressure and instinctively shields his face with his arm. Like the god of thunder himself, Riku's body becomes engulfed in continuous, crackling bolts of lightning as he confidently claims he has now reached his full power. He then prepares to attack, taunting Agito to show his full strength as well and not hold anything back in their battle. Pointing his joined hands forward, Riku summons Divine Thunder and sends a powerful bolt of energy hurtling toward Agito. Watching Riku unleash his full power, Agito realizes he cannot block the attack with a half-hearted move, so he decides to get serious and raises his sword, gripping it tightly with both hands. As the Divine Thunder hurls toward Agito, it creates massive shockwaves that begin to damage the barrier around the arena, triggering warning signals from the system. Jinguji, who had feared this outcome, curses Riku, calling him an idiot, as the ceiling begins to crumble and chunks of rubble fall to the ground. Meanwhile, Riku wonders whether Agito will be able to withstand his power. Riku thinks he has already won and takes a sigh of relief as the Divine Thunder engulfs Agito, but to his shock, the attack seems to have no effect. Agito, having just performed one of the secret techniques of the Eight-Blade Swordsmanship, successfully nullifies the Divine Thunder, reducing it to nothingness. Witnessing this incredible feat, both the spectators and Jinguji are left utterly bewildered. Riku's jaw drops in astonishment as he stares at Agito, who has effortlessly erased his Divine Thunder. Jinguji, still in disbelief, struggles to comprehend the extraordinary scene unfolding before his eyes. Agito raises his sword, locking his intense gaze directly on Riku, signaling that the fight is far from over. Taking a step into the air, Agito causes a small explosion-like burst of light to erupt around him. Riku, entirely focused on the burst of light, fails to notice that Agito has moved with lightning speed and is now right behind him. By the time Riku senses Agito, it's too late. Agito strikes swiftly, leaving a deep wound on Riku's chest with blood gushing out. Agito apologizes to the injured Riku and turns his back, explaining that he couldn't hold back as Riku begins to plummet toward the ground. Cursing Agito's comment, Riku continues falling, shouting loudly that the next time they face each other, he will win. With a look of shock and disbelief, Jinguji announces that Riku is unable to continue fighting and officially declares Agito the winner of the duel. Minutes later, Jinguji sits in his office, still shaken by the fact that an F-rank student like Agito managed to defeat an S-rank hero. Reviewing the footage of the fight, Jinguji carefully examines each frame, trying to understand how Agito pulled off such an impressive victory. Later that day, the 4 candidates who participated in the duel are summoned to Jinguji's office for an official announcement. Lina, tending to Riku's wounds, scolds him for leaving the medical room impatiently, while Riku groans in pain. Standing before Agito and Amazaki, Jinguji praises them for demonstrating extraordinary power and skill during the duel. He officially declares them members of Seraphim and instructs them to prepare for the upcoming investigation into the resurrection of the 6 dragons. Agito asks Jinguji if only 4 of them will be enough to handle such a dangerous investigation. Jinguji reassures him that it won't be an issue, as other A-rank mages from Seraphim can be mobilized immediately if needed. He advises Agito to prepare for leading squads of dozens, prompting Agito to admit he has never taken on a leadership role before. Agito recalls that the last time he led anyone was over 100 years ago, and even then, he had delegated the command to Tanaski. Jinguji suggests that the heroes rest for now and reconvene tomorrow to discuss the finer details of their mission. Suddenly, the man busy on the computer shouts for Jinguji's immediate attention, reporting an urgent development. He informs that the unit led by S-rank mage Sakagami was annihilated by an unidentified dragon, leaving everyone stunned. Jinguji, in disbelief, shouts in frustration, questioning how an S-rank mage and A-rank heroes could be wiped out so completely. Agito concludes that this confirms the 6 dragons have finally resurrected and are now making their presence known. Without hesitation, Agito volunteers to confront the dragon, leaving Jinguji visibly shocked. Agito argues that their allies are in danger, and this is no time to hesitate or wait around. Riku supports Agito's decision and, clenching his fist, insists they can't leave Sakagami to face it alone. Lina quickly offers to accompany Agito, and Amazaki follows, sternly declaring she will join as well. With a resigned sigh, Jinguji decides to let these heroes take the lead and instructs them to rescue Sakagami. Meanwhile, at the Special A gate located at Shinjuku Underground 7th Pole, several mages lie dead on the ground. Amidst the rubble and blazing flames, a fire dragon stands tall, mocking the humans for their weakness. Hidden behind a large boulder, A-rank troop Lieutenant Ichikawa Kuda gasps, admitting that the dragon is too fierce. Ichikawa turns to Sakagami, the woman beside him, and nervously asks what they should do next. Sakagami, trembling and seated on the ground, breaks down in tears, apologizing for the deaths of the mages. Through sobs, she calls herself a failed leader, blaming her incompetence for exposing her allies to danger. With despair, she places 2 fingers over her temple as if mimicking a gun and declares she must atone for her sins. Ichikawa, alarmed, grabs her hand and pulls it away, urging her not to make any rash decisions. He reminds her that her teleportation skill saved them all and prevented a complete wipeout. However, Sakagami continues to scream frantically, calling herself a failure, and begins mumbling incoherently, scaring Ichikawa. Eventually, she regains her composure, reminding herself of her responsibility as a supreme commander. After some thought, she orders Ichikawa to evacuate the injured while she distracts the dragon. Ichikawa hesitates, unwilling to leave Sakagami behind, but ultimately obeys her orders. Meanwhile, the dragon clicks its tongue in pity as it looks down at the injured survivors and decides to finish them off. It opens its mouth wide, preparing to unleash a fiery attack, but Sakagami suddenly lunges at it from behind. Summoning a massive dimension sword, she swings it at the dragon's neck, only for the sword to shatter on impact. Stunned, Sakagami watches in disbelief as the dragon turns to her and mocks her weak attack. The dragon then demonstrates its power, unleashing a torrent of flames from its mouth. Sakagami taunts the dragon, asking if that's all it's got, before flying away to lure it away from the injured. Realizing Sakagami is baiting it, the dragon still gives chase, trailing closely behind her. Mid-flight, the dragon breathes a swirling fire that narrowly misses Sakagami, almost scorching her. Glancing at the injured mages below, Sakagami realizes evacuating them all will be difficult. Feeling her mana depleting rapidly, she decides to take a risk and turns to face the pursuing dragon. Taking deep breaths, she raises her hand and summons Abyss Gate, which begins expanding above the dragon. Startled, the dragon notices the abyss, but its wings are already trapped within its pull. Turning to Sakagami, the dragon accuses her of connecting to imaginary space as she struggles to maintain the gate. Within moments, the dragon is fully engulfed by the abyss, its body disappearing entirely. Once the dragon is gone, Sakagami closes the Abyss Gate, letting out a relieved sigh. Ichikawa and other mages arrive at the scene just as Sakagami takes a moment to catch her breath. Sakagami questions Ichikawa's return, and he admits he couldn't abandon her to face danger alone. Surveying the area, Ichikawa asks where the dragon has gone, and Sakagami proudly explains she dealt with it herself. Hearing this, Ichikawa praises Sakagami, causing her to blush slightly. Reflecting on the battle, Sakagami notes the dragon's resemblance to Rubel, one of the 6 dragons from a century ago. She reminds herself that the Sword Saint had defeated those dragons long ago, so this couldn't be the same Rubel. Suddenly, Ichikawa notices a figure standing behind Sakagami and wonders if it's reinforcement from the guild. The figure sticks out his tongue and gives a thumbs down before unleashing a chaos explosion. The massive explosion sends Sakagami flying backward with a powerful shockwave. Crashing to the ground, Sakagami notices Ichikawa and the other mages also knocked unconscious. Only Sakagami remains conscious, trying to recover as the villain introduces himself with a wicked smile as Rubel. As Sakagami tries to rise, Rubel forcefully pushes her back to the ground with his foot. He then demands that she tell him where the Sword Saint Agito is, explaining that he has heard the Saint Sword has been reincarnated. Sakagami, hearing this, is surprised as she also has no knowledge of the reincarnation. Rubel points out that Agito must be associated with the guild and insists that Sakagami reveal everything she knows. With a trembling voice, Sakagami denies knowing anything, claiming that even if she did, she would never tell Rubel. Rubel mocks her, telling her to stop acting cool when she's in his mercy, calling her a fool, and suggesting she obey quietly. Despite being pushed down, Sakagami pushes back, matching Rubel's pressure, and declares that even in darkness, light will shine through. Irritating Rubel, she boldly adds that if the Sword Saint has reincarnated, she will fully trust him. Rubel, frustrated, forces Sakagami back to the ground with more force and demands to know why she is so persistent. He believes Sakagami must be hiding something, so he summons a massive rock above his head, threatening to crush her if she doesn't reveal the truth. Sakagami, with a determined shout, declares that she has no information to give. Annoyed by her defiance, Rubel decides to punish her, beginning with the death of her allies. He hurls the massive stone toward Ichikawa and the 3 other mages, intending to crush them. Seeing this, Sakagami desperately screams at her allies to get up and run. Rubel taunts her, asking if she is now willing to tell him everything. Filled with rage, Sakagami summons the Dimension Sword, swinging it at Rubel in a desperate attempt to strike him down. However, Rubel simply raises his hand and shatters the Dimension Blade effortlessly. Sakagami, now feeling hopeless, begins to tear up, fearing that this is the end for her and her comrades. In a final desperate act, she prays to the Sword Saint, begging him to come and save her and her allies if he truly has reincarnated. Closing her eyes in fear, she lets the tears flow down her cheeks. At that very moment, Agito appears, and with a single swing of his sword, he splits the massive rock in half, saving the mages. Both Rubel and Sakagami are shocked as they witness Agito's sudden appearance. Agito calls out to Rubel, warning him that he will cut off his neck once again. Recognizing Agito as the reincarnated Sword Saint, Rubel eyes him with hunger, flicking out his tongue like a snake.